Saturday, good afternoon. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift, episode 151. That is 151 weeks in a row, no weeks off. Dr. Aditi, I see you. We're going to bring you on in lesson five. And personally, I could not be more excited. We're going to have a lot of fun today, guys. Happy Super Bowl week. Let me know your shots. Big Dave, I see you. Let's bring you on. Let's get this party started, and hopefully you're not looking too handsome that you outshine me. But I'll take my chances. On the chat, and also if you have any questions for Dr. Aditi, we love to make this interactive and so forth, as you guys know.
Way to know your timing and risk tolerance. Way to know your timing and risk tolerance before you get on with me. That's a great thing, my brother.
What, the text?
No, I said know your timing and risk tolerance when you said you'll take your chances of me being better looking than you.
How you doing, Uncle Dave?
Oh, fantastic is an understatement. I just got back from the Super Bowl, my 35th visit to the Super Bowl, and I am ready to be at home with the family this weekend, enjoy the Super Bowl. We got a Pop Warner football party on Sunday, Valentine's Day party tonight, and my aunt's birthday breakfast this morning. So came home to prioritize what's most important to me in the trajectory, in the divine direction of where I want to be or better. To give the amount of time to those most relative to me. Association as well is important. And of course, those that bleed or feed me most. And that's why I'm back at home.
Yeah, love it. And what a week. What was the takeaway that really stood out to you in regards to all the meetings and the people that you met and hung out with in the Super Bowl week?
I think my biggest takeaway is the two lessons I learned early in my career by running the most notable sports agency in the world, Lee Steinberg, is one, that sports is the biggest backdrop in the world for opportunity, options, and touches of favor. And two, the stage theory is the best way in order to incorporate and take advantage of that backdrop. Whether it was Rob Riggle or Will I Am or Marshall Falk or Austin Eckler or Tony Orlando from Tony Orlando and Don singing a little tie a yellow ribbon round an old oak tree, or even Flava Flav kicking it and rocking it on the TikTok, from Little John to so many other people that have different skills, different knowledge, and different desires other than playing quarterback. Although we, from Sean Merriman to other Hall of Famers, Warren Moon and Joe Montana, and all the greats were around. But I find it interesting that those that understood sports as a backdrop to the skills, knowledge, and desire that you have, and the stage theory makes it pop around the world, whether you're at the Super Bowl in Las Vegas or in your closet hanging out with your family.
Speaking of stage theory, how pumped are you personally to speak at Einstein's Lab?
I am really excited, and I'm really excited. I actually, on top of that, have been offered a commencement speech at Princeton. So quite an honor. Got a pretty big following there in the Ivy Leagues. Not bad for a guy who got rejected by almost every school in the Ivy Leagues twice for undergrad and law school. So, if you keep staying consistent and persistent in the pursuit, like Einstein, you may someday change the world.
I love it. And two quick questions before we bring on our awesome guest, who's brilliant, beautiful, dynamic, all the things. First and foremost, do we have a prediction for the Super Bowl, for the actual game?
Now, I go by intuition. I have always found that when you're picking football, the intellect and inspiration don't guide you best. It is the intuition. And my intuition tells me that Brock Purdy is going to be the MVP because the San Francisco 49ers are going to beat the unbeatable Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City Chiefs. I know that wasn't a popular economic decision and the gambling world, but for me, I go with intuition, and my intuition is telling me Niners and Brock Purdy. I think our friend Kyle is going to change the plan to use McCaffrey, the MVP of the league, as a decoy, and Brock Purdy's going to have a heck of a game.
It should be a sick game regardless. It's a great team.
I hope so. I over being able to pick the winner, I like close games. They're the most entertaining form of viewing sport, what I call fandom, or, there's certain sports that are spectator sports. Obviously, so few people can play professional football. It's the best spectator sport in the world. But then you have participatory sports, and you can monetize these two different types of sports in two different ways. Pickleball is probably the hottest participatory sport in America. And if you understand that, you'll know how to monetize each and every sport by understanding in what level of percentages. Is it a spectator sport, or is it a participatory sport, like running marathons, like the Eagle flies through 26.2 miles in less than 4 hours? Amazing.
Panther. I love it.
I am a ferocious Buddha or a constipated Buddha. It depends on how you interpret my beautiful design.
You can't go wrong either
way. You got to reconcile it one way or another. But I'm super excited to have Dr. Didi in the house.
I'm going to ask you one quick question before we bring her on. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone so good at creating systems as you are, but you're often very productive. I purposely didn't use the word busy. You're always doing stuff and executing. How do you create the time to also create and gather that white space to move the needle inside of just taking care of business all the time?
I think my secret sauce is I study time, and I study time not just in the sense that I study my calendar. I give attention and intention to what I'm going to do, say, think, feel, and believe relative to where I think I want to be or better, the results, consequences, coincidences that I want. But I actually study time. That's how Einstein and I became so close, is understanding how to utilize productivity, accessibility, and gratitude within linear time in reconciliation with infinite time. And so it's a lifelong journey. I'm not smart enough. I'm studying space as well, but understanding applied mathematics and theoretical physics is not enough to truly understand space. But time's a little bit easier when you start with linear time and see how it's reconciling with infinite time. But let the doctor speak of better and higher frequencies than I. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. I love this football chatter. My husband is from Detroit, and he's a huge Lions fan. So last weekend was hard for us.
Oh, yeah. It was hard. My head of my media is a Lions fan, and I got him a Super Bowl ticket if the Lions won. So I realized I probably should have told him that before the game, because it made it even worse for him.
We were going to go. We were going to go this Sunday. He was like, the whole family was all fired up.
Yeah, next year. They did terrific.
Dr. D, just because we still indulge, we still watch the game and enjoy it tomorrow?
Of course. I'm not, full disclosure, guys, I'm not really into sports or football, but my husband is. And so in solidarity, I asked him if he would watch, because, he might be really sad. If I had a team and they didn't win, I would be so gutted. But he was fine. Like the next day, he's like, teams win, teams lose. That's what happens.
Well, when you're a Lions fan, you're used to not being in the Super Bowl. So I know what that feels like, because this is my team, and it's been 30 years since the Niners beat up us in the Super Bowl in 1994. So I know we're only halfway as discouraged as the Lions.
And I liked what you said about, I was really listening intently. I liked what you said about like taking the game off the field, because I think a lot about athletes and how they live their lives. And it's a very glamorous life, you would think, on the field, but off the field, many athletes are incredibly regimented. They lead a monk-like existence. They are like going to bed every day at 8:00, and you assume that they're going to all these parties, but in fact, because to be able to function like that on the field, they have to be completely regimented and really prioritizing mental health, physical health, self-care, all those things.
Yeah, it creates a glamorized stuck. When I ran the sports agency, it was very difficult because of how much hard work and how much you invest in yourself. And while everyone wants to be you and thinks a certain thing about you because you're in the position that you're in, it creates a glamorized stuck that can create separation and anxiety and depression as well. So it's something that I've helped with and dealt with. It used to drive me crazy when I ran the sports agency. They made the movie Jerry Maguire about our firm, and people like, oh my God, you're so lucky. That's the best job in the world. And I'm like, how do you know it's the best job in the world? Because I find it to be one of the most difficult jobs in the world. And if they didn't pay me a lot, they pay me a lot to do it. and nobody would do it for free. It sucked. So it's good to be out of that glamorized stuck
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
I talk about athletes and that, I think so many athletes really embody the mind-body connection. It's something that we mere mortals don't really understand or talk about or think about, right? But like athletes live it and breathe it every single day. I talk about that a lot in my work, but I am very into the whole world of athletics from that vantage point of like, how do they optimize their mind, body, and spirit every single week. And it's just amazing. So all of those lessons I'm really into, like the philosophical lessons, but watching the game, guys, I'm just like, that's not, never been into it. My whole family, obsessed with sports. My brother, my father, my mother, my uncles, aunts. My husband, my daughter, not me.
And that's okay. We're about to go real. This is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get deep right now. I hope the community is ready. For our audience and community, 151 weeks in a row now. If you were not familiar with Dr. D, do yourself a favor. Do a deep dive, play catch up, read her book, all the things. We're just going to dive right in. A couple big topics that you talk about often that everybody can relate to in some capacity is stress and resilience. How can somebody, we'll just dive right in, after a long and potentially stressful week, how can they utilize the weekend, Dr. Didi, for maybe a stress reset?
So, the thing about stress that's really interesting is that not all stress is created equal. There's good stress and bad stress. And so you may, the way, David was explaining his week earlier, you may really embody good, healthy stress. And we need a little bit of healthy stress to move our life forward. For example, going back to the analogy of football, tomorrow is the Super Bowl. And so when you are rooting for your favorite team, that's an example of healthy stress. When you get a promotion or a new job or fall in love or have a child or move to a new home or get a car, whatever, any of those moments in your life that create a lot of joy, but also stress. These are all versions of healthy stress. We need a little bit of healthy stress to move our life forward. It's biologically impossible to live a life with zero stress. So that's the first sort of myth that I really want to debunk. And even, you'll read lots of things about like live a life with zero stress. It's impossible. The goal of life is not to live a life with zero stress. It's to live a life with healthy, manageable stress. And there are two kinds. So there's that healthy stress that we're talking about in this like fun conversation about football and productivity and moving our life forward. However, there is also a very real kind of unhealthy stress, the other kind of stress. It's unproductive, dysfunctional. It really just, brings you down, causes a lot of mental and physical manifestations. And so that is what we're trying to decrease, whether it be through my work or this conversation and all of the work about mental health. It's about bringing that unchecked, runaway, unhealthy stress, scientifically we call it maladaptive stress, and bringing it back into balance and equilibrium with healthy stress. So what's something you can do on the weekend? What you may think is like, I'm going to try to relax, right? You hear that word all the time. Just try to relax when you're really stressed out. Friends and family, your loved ones will say, you just need to relax more. That just gets under my skin, and there is no such thing. So when you watch movies or all of the things that we talked about, like a Netflix binge, watching the game, going shopping, getting a spa day, wonderful, important things to do, but they are simply band-aids. You don't get at the root cause. And often when you do those things and still feel that sense of stress and burnout, you often feel like, hey, I'm not good at managing my stress because I'm doing all of these things that we know that we are supposed to do to relax. It's not working. I feel the same. And so there's very small, simple mindset shifts that you can do to reset your stress. This weekend, try to create a digital boundary. So if you are gearing up, I think a lot of your audience is going to watch football, right? So if you're gearing up for the game and you're going to be engaged with some form of either social media or tech or just watching TV, in that day prior or today, try to create some digital boundaries. Don't spend so much time online. take your phone off your nightstand. That is one of the game changers that can really help you with your stress this weekend and every day. Why is that? Because often 50% of people, first thing in the morning when they wake up and open their eyes, before their second eye is even open, they're scrolling the news, they're scrolling the headlines, and that does a number on our brains in terms of stress and burnout. And then get outside, do something that you can move your body to get out of your head and into your body. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a weekend warrior, but even a little bit, like a 10, 20-minute walk today, tomorrow, to help reset. And then I think the final kind of key to manage your stress this weekend is to try to go to bed early. If Sunday, you're going to be up late, try to go to bed early tonight. 10 o'clock is kind of the magic number. Embrace your inner grandma or grandpa and go to bed at 10.
I feel like that was a master class. Thank you, Dave. You look like you're about to burst with enthusiasm.
Yeah. Well, I utilize 3 concentric circles to manage, as Craig was saying. I love to create systems. So we all have a comfort zone with no stress. Riding a bicycle, for example, it takes no thought, no stress. But we also have outside of that a learning zone, and that's where we manage our stress, because fear is omnipresent. And I use time as a dependent variable in understanding, one, I don't seek to understand immediately what I'm afraid of. If it's outside of me, it may be very distinguishable. If a saber-toothed tiger walked across a cave, we know why we're afraid. But if it's childhood trauma because my dad left when I was 5, it doesn't do me good to go down that rabbit hole in the middle of my day when I'm trying to be successful and stay in the learning zone. There's a certain amount of time that you want to spend with a therapist or read a book about what your traumas or genetic or energetic inheritances are. So for me, I try to manage my life in that learning zone. And I believe there's only activities. So if I get a massage, that is just an activity. The same as if I read a book or do a coaching call or put on a TV show. And what makes that activity productive or not is how we manage the reaction to fear. How much time do we spend in an ego-based consciousness that creates dis-ease, that puts us out into an anxiety zone? Those who spend too much time being anxious actually create a constrictive life. That's why so many highly actualizing, extremely successful people end up not being able to get out of bed or even suicidal, because they stay in the anxiety zone for so long that it just slowly but surely shrinks their comfort zone until you can't even get out of bed, or you're so separate that you want to kill yourself. So I believe by understanding, I'm going to spend minutes and moments in my reaction to fear, and understanding, as you teach, actually, to get to center. So when we identify, I'm pissed off, I'm anxious, frustrated, guilty, resentful, separate, inferior, creating dis-ease, physical, anatomical, chemical dis-ease, as well as mental, emotional, spiritual dis-ease. If we spend less time in dis-ease, we'll be able to leverage all the omniscient, all powerful, all-knowing source of energy that creates ease. And for me, the biggest confirmation of this is just simply the biochemical reaction to being at ease or being inspired, which is dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. It's God's doggy biscuit. When you're behaving properly, you're going to get those things inserted and make you feel good. And if you have dis-ease, he's going to give you cortisol, and that's going to create more dis-ease and inflammation in your system. So giving, receiving, witnessing, giving and receiving. So I would tell you that even people that binge watch, if you're going to binge watch negativity, I believe that's worse than what other people would call work. If you learn to love what you do, you learn to love what you didn't love, and you learn to love what you didn't like, it will tell you all its secrets and put you at ease. It actually will cure the dis-ease, instead of what most people judge and put conditions on, these activities that they may not get paid for. Just because you're not paid for it doesn't mean it puts you at ease. And just because you're paid for something doesn't mean it creates dis-ease either. So that's why I don't believe in work. I believe in activity. But nonetheless, I use time in order to effectuate how much I spend in the reaction to fear. And it may not be for everyone, but it's 7 days a week for me, which allows a greater amount of time to be at ease, or to be at a higher level of intelligence, intuition, and inspiration.
This is awesome.
Did that make sense to you, Craig? Because you look perplexed.
No, it makes a lot. I'm just very blessed right now to be the third wheel here with you two juggernauts that have a little bit more experience in life than I do. And I'm just loving this. And these topics, they're not niche. They're applicable for everybody, right? Whether it's activity time or managing stress. And spoiler, the stress will never be gone, just like the ego will never be gone. But can we manage it? Can we have systems in place, so to speak? And that's one of the reasons why I love Dr. Aditi's work. And another thing I saw that you say, and I'm not 100% sure what we mean by this, but I think it would be very valuable for the audience, is that brains are built like dams. Tell us more.
So, you know, right now in 2024, think back to 2020 or 2021. We were all living through this individual and global catastrophe, felt a lot of, trauma, but you shored up your internal reserves most likely and kept it together at all costs. Now in 2024, many people, the majority, so in a room of 30 people, the data shows that in a room of 30 people right now, 21 people are struggling with stress and burnout. So Craig, when you say that like this is applicable to everyone, it truly is. 70% of people have at least one feature of stress and burnout that's across industry and country and what job you do or where you live or how much money you make or whom you love. I mean, these things are universal. And so particularly now, people are feeling a lot of struggle with their stress and burnout. They are feeling worse with their mental health than they were in 2020. You would think just cognitively, like we went through a really difficult time in 2020, 2021, and we're out now. So we should all be celebrating. In fact, every headline leading up to this post-pandemic era talked about the roaring 20s. Like we're going to get through this difficult time in 2020 and we're going to come out and it's going to be this massive celebration. And yet right now, it doesn't feel very celebratory at all. People are running on fumes and people are really struggling. When you are having this personal experience, so if you are feeling this way, just know based on the data that you are not alone and it is not your fault. It is your biology of stress acting exactly as it should. What do I mean by that? If you are struggling now and you're thinking, wait, hang on, everything's better now, I should be joyous and celebratory. Our brains aren't built like that. When I would see those headlines about the roaring 20s, I would laugh and say like, oh, this is like so not how our brains are built. Our brains are built like dams. What that means is that during difficult moments, like what we have recently lived through, we shore up our internal reserves and keep it together at all costs. I've seen this with my cancer patients. I've had cancer patients who've come in on day one of getting a diagnosis or getting treatment. Throughout their treatment phase, they are stoic. They don't shed a tear. They keep it together. The minute the oncologist says, congrats, your cancer is cleared, I'll see you in 6 months, they're in my office the next day weeping and saying, what's wrong, doc? I should be feeling so much better. I should be having a party to celebrate. Why do I feel like this? And it's similar to why we all feel like this now, that sense of languishing and just feeling like a slump. It's because when you are going through an acute crisis like we have all been through, we keep it together. And only when we feel psychologically safe is when we let down our guards and our true emotions can emerge. And it's often a deluge when that happens. That is why my cancer patients, at the end of their treatment, when they're given a clean bill of health, is when they're in my office crying, not during the treatment, because we keep it together. Now, of course, that's not to say and minimize people's difficult experience during the pandemic. That was a really difficult time for many people, and many people struggled. But equally so, people were holding it together, and now they are struggling. So it's called the delayed stress reaction, and it's what many of us are facing. In a room of 30 people, 21 people are facing stress and burnout. So if you are feeling these things now, but you were perfectly fine in 2020 and 2021, that is why. It is a normal part of your biology. It is how your brain and body have functioned. And now if you're feeling that way, like David said, seek some counseling, see your doctor, see a therapist. The only way around is through. But the most important thing in clinical medicine, at least, is that we need to normalize and validate difficult experiences. So you don't feel alone, because when you're feeling a sense of stress and burnout, the irony is that we are all feeling like this, but it's a completely isolating experience. We're isolated in our togetherness, particularly now more than ever.
Ooh, this is the deep stuff, right, Dave?
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm just processing. I love when I learn something that I've really never thought about, and it sends me into a deep dive over the weekend of doing research. The only thing I can think of to complement that is, two things are needed when we're having resistance in our life or disease, and it's that distance between behaviors and the outcome that we want. And that brain as a dam helps us seek two things that as human beings we're not capable of understanding or knowing. It's this outcome that has occurred that is not reconciled with our behaviors. So we come to a point of fear where I've done everything I can to be in a trajectory of where I want to be or better, but now there's this global pandemic, and this business that I had for 20 years is dead, um, because it revolved around, and I had no control of that. And so we struggle and create resistance, and we become, I assume, and I'll study more, this dam, so that we can be productive, accessible, and gracious through that period. And then there has to be a release of the dam as the water is building up and building up and building up. What I see to help is, if you seek during a period of resistance to shorten that distance, wisdom, to find people like Dr. D, be able to seek this wisdom of people who have spent their lives experiencing and studying it, which is increasing the understanding and knowing. But it also, in a non-religious, spiritual, philosophical, and theoretical way, requires faith. Um, it's the wisdom and the faith that shorten the distance of that resistance or disease. And those people, and I'd love to hear uh, D, those people that have more faith, regardless of their religion, spirituality, theories, or philosophies that they believe in. For me, I have a best option faith that says there's something bigger than me that is protecting and promoting and loving me more than my mom. And so when the pandemic happens or dis-ease happens in my life, that wisdom is just the best option. It's not grounded in any, great religious, spiritual, theoretical, or philosophy, other than that's the best thing I can think of to get me through the shitty times. That I have faith there's something bigger than me that loves me more than my mom, and it gives me less fear. How important is faith in the dam? And you talked about the 9 people that don't have the same impact. Is it because not only they have more wisdom, but also they have more faith?
What a great question. I think for me, in terms of framing that question, is when you are going through stress, so that approach that you use, David, it's an approach that you have developed over decades of going through tough stuff, and you have that emotional, psychological distance from what's happening. When you are going through the actual thing, and this is probably something that maybe happened to you when you were younger, when you weren't, because our brain is a muscle. So you've trained your brain to have this approach now. So when you're going through difficult things, you can have that emotional and psychological distance. But when someone who is young or someone who is older in their middle or later ages, but hasn't had that sort of training that you have given yourself, when you are living in that mode of stress, you are living in fight or flight mode, and you are governed by this small almond-shaped structure deep in your brain. I'm not going to get too scientific, but it's called the amygdala. And that amygdala is focused on survival and self-preservation. It is cave person mode. It scans the world for danger and the sense of hyper-vigilance. Your brain, and you've said this in many times throughout our conversation, that idea of space. Your brain and your body are expertly designed to handle short-term bursts of stress. It's what our brains and our bodies are meant to do. But when that stress becomes chronic, it's not the saber-toothed tiger in the forest and then you have that downtime. It's bills, marital discord, financial troubles, health issues, parenting struggles. There's so many of these tigers, these metaphorical tigers in our world, in our modern world, that don't go away. And so that amygdala, that hypervigilance, is always on in the background. What you're talking about, David, is this idea of like having that distance and space, whether it be wisdom or faith, the words that you're using, These are all governed by another part of your brain, not the amygdala, not fight or flight or stress or self-preservation. It's governed by an area called the prefrontal cortex, which is an area right behind your forehead. And that area governs strategic thinking, forward planning, memory, organization, adulting, so to speak. If you are living in amygdala mode, it is very difficult to get into that prefrontal cortex and have that distance. And there are certain tools that you can do to help get out of that self-preservation survival mode to be able to have that distance that you're describing. It takes a little time, it takes a little practice, but it can be done. And the beauty of stress and burnout is that it is reversible. I also just want to reiterate that if you are unable to have that perspective that David has now, just understand that it's a skill that can be built. You may not have it now, but you certainly can develop that skill to have that distance. We are all going to have amygdala mode from time to time. We're going to be in fight or flight or stress, like we said, right? Like at the start of this conversation. The goal of life is not to go through life with zero stress. It's biologically impossible. It's about being able to use that moment and get transition out of that fight or flight mode back to that broader thinking. And that's the toggle between the two. Takes a little time and practice, but it's a skill. It's a skill just like riding a bike. It's a skill. And remember that your brain is a muscle, like a bicep. So when you do bicep curls and you build that muscle and you get that hypertrophy, you can do the same with your brain. Another fancy scientific word, we don't have to get into it, but it's called neuroplasticity. It's this idea that your brain isn't just, a grab bag, like what you got at birth is what you got for life. And hey, good if you got a good one and bad if you didn't. It's that your brain is ever changing based on external stimuli and based on what you do. So when you do better, you feel better. It's also the mind-body connection. And this idea of neuroplasticity, that your brain can change and grow in the face of stimuli, is really heartening because it tells us that when we do better for ourselves, when it comes to stress and burnout, bring in a lot of the strategies like managing, all of the things that we can talk about, the concrete strategies, in time, it actually rewires your brain so that you can toggle out of that fight or flight mode back to that resilient state governed by your prefrontal cortex. I know I got a little scientific there, guys.
No, I'm all over it.
This is the
That's
good
our
stuff.
frequency. That's awesome.
If you want to go higher, you have to go deeper. So thank you for that stuff. And I love how there's multiple different tools that both you just spoke about. And also, it's like a muscle. You can flex it, right? So if anyone's listening right now, it's like, oh, I don't really have that in my arsenal. Well, starting today, you could start to develop that like a skill. This was unbelievable, so tangible. Dr. Didi, thank you so much for your beautiful residence, so forth. I want everybody to grab your book. It's the 5 resets, right?
It's the 5 resets.
There it is.
Rewire your brain and body for less stress and more resilience. One of the reasons everything in this book is completely free, that was really important to me because I have seen lots and lots of patients with various resources. And so while it's wonderful, like wouldn't we all love to check out and take 6 months to go to Bali for a surfing holiday? Sign me up for that. Or a month in Paris when I'm hanging out eating chocolate croissants to decrease my stress. That is not realistic. We have constraints in our daily lives. We have jobs and families and, responsibilities. And so instead, what can you do to really manage your stress in the middle of your messy, overscheduled life? And how can you learn certain skills? Your brain is a muscle. It can be trained just like a bicep. And so there are ways that you can train your brain for less stress to be able to handle the slings and arrows of life, which are inevitable, right? They're inevitable. And you can do that in a lot of different ways that we talk about in the 5 resets. I feel like Vanna White right now.
That's good. Thank you so much. And I am blessed to spend my Super Bowl weekend with both of you and Mr. Siegel, as always. 151. We're coming on 3 years. Talk about consistent behavior. Let's all get back together. I appreciate both of you. I got to jump.
Love you. Dr. Zita, real quickly, just curious, do you have coffee in the morning?
I don't have coffee in the morning. I have tea. I'm not a coffee drinker.
You're on fire, and it's contagious. And thank you so much for today. This is awesome. We're going to send the replay to our whole community and get everyone to grab the book because this stuff, like we said earlier, is applicable and important for everybody. So thank you, and I look forward to connecting with you offline after this.
Thank you. Take care, Craig. Happy weekend.
Bye. Have a great weekend. That was an epic one, guys. Hope you got half as much value from that as I did. Very tangible nuggets. Stress is something that, spoiler alert, happens to all of us in some capacity. But there's good stress and there's not so good stress, and how do we manage it and so forth. So this is unbelievable. If you guys weren't already following Dr. Didi, do yourself a favor, check her out immediately. Check out all the awesome stuff she has going on. Her book, The 5 Resets. Uncle Dave, thank you as always. 151 weeks in a row, unbelievable. And if you guys want some clarity over the weekend, you could join our texting community. It's totally free. And we do a little bit of free coaching in there with the team. Just text 917-634-3796. And I love you guys so much, and I hope you enjoy the Super Bowl and you're proactive this weekend. Not reactive, but proactive and productive. And I love you guys. Have a great week.